Well, I just got back from a trip to the US and I thought I would share my thoughts with you. So, I'm Tessa with Hip Over 50. Yes, I have an American accent, but I was born in England and I consider myself British, especially now that I've been living here for a few years. So, going back to Texas was kind of a culture shock. I was kind of surprised. I'd lived there for about 10 years. It's been about 10 years since I have been back there, and a lot has changed. So here's my impressions of what's going on in the US right now. Texas has definitely changed. The one thing I noticed before I even set foot in the US was while I was waiting to board my flight on American Airlines at the gate at Heathrow, I looked around and everybody was wearing sweatpants. And I thought, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I don't miss that super duper leisure culture in the US. I like the fact that people here in England and Europe like to dress for the occasion and like to look smart and like to make an effort. So there's one thing I don't miss right off the bat. Number two, and this may be a surprise because I have done videos where I've kind of moaned about things that you can't get here that I was used to getting there. Well, now I'm going to say that a little bit too much choice. Yes, I had a little bit of choice overload paralysis. I was so excited about going to Target. Hey, Target, getting to shop there, but honestly, it was overwhelming. It's such a big store. There's aisle after aisle after aisle. And yes, there's almost anything you could possibly want there, but it's overwhelming. How much choice do you really need? I don't know. But anyway, that's something I don't miss. Speaking of which, that those parts of the US that look like they've been paved over, and DFW is probably on the top of the list there. I didn't even recognize roads that I used to travel every day for work. I had a home there in Fort Worth or outside of Fort Worth. I had a business there, but they have changed so much. There's so much concrete everywhere. There's highways, overpasses, underpasses, intersections after intersections, strip mall after strip mall. There is like no green space whatsoever. I mean, I went to a dog park, but I didn't see any people parks. I mean, here, even if you live in London, there's so many parks to choose from. So I wouldn't miss that. I don't miss the fact that probably due to poor zoning, that things are just built on top of each other, and there is no room to just kind of roam and get away from it all. That may be just the DFW Metroplex, but that was my impression. And speaking of which, number four on my list is I don't miss that lack of walkability. It is definitely a car culture. There was a little train that had been, approved, I guess, to run between Fort Worth and Dallas, but not very practical. I guess if you want to go from one to the other, you have to get off at the airport, get on the other side of the airport, and then go on to Dallas. So, yeah, there's sidewalks, but they don't really go anywhere. You don't see anybody walking on them. Occasionally you'll see somebody jogging, but and speaking of that, number five is that fast pace. I'm not an intimidated driver by any means. I mean, I've driven into Heathrow, I've driven all over the UK, I've driven all over the US, but it was relentless, the traffic there, and it's so busy. And people do not kind of observe the rules of the road. They'll cut in front of you, they'll cut undertake you, they'll overtake you. We do have hectic traffic here, but people are a little more civilized about it. So, yeah, I don't miss that fast pace. And I don't miss living in a climate controlled culture. That's number six, where you've either got the air conditioning on or you've got the heat on. Nobody opens a window. Even my rental car was nagging me because I'd open the window. So, yeah, I remember living in Florida where we had the air conditioning on just about year round because it was so humid and warm. But yeah, I like to throw a window open. I would hate to lose that. And I don't miss living in a culture or a climate where you can't do that year round. Speaking of climates, heat. Yeah, that's number seven on my list. It was almost 30 degrees Celsius when I was there in February. A little too warm. I do like my warmth and sunshine as much as the next person, but the limit is 40 plus degrees in the summertime. That's over 100 degrees, folks. And yeah, it's getting to be real in the US, especially places like Texas. In fact, that's the main reason I moved away from Texas is I just couldn't take the heat anymore. And you know what they say, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Speaking of heat, number eight on my list is gun culture. I don't miss that. I mean, you may not see it, but it's kind of there, and you know it's there, and you know it's always a possibility. I was walking to the grocery store, and I happened to pass this therapy office, and they had this big sign saying, "No handguns allowed," not even if you have a concealed weapon permit. So yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, it's just always there. It's kind of, yeah, I would feel very uncomfortable with that, and I don't miss it. And speaking of being uncomfortable, I think there's this general sense of kind of unease and anxiety. It may be due to the upcoming autumn elections. Um, yeah, that's probably a big part of it. The two-party system has kind of let the U.S. down, and it's no longer united we stand. It's more like divided we fall. And I think people are feeling that. Maybe it's also since, it's sort of a knock-on effect from the pandemic, higher prices. I don't know. But, and number 10 on my list is I don't miss the superficiality. And that's probably uniquely Texas. Don't get me wrong, the Texas people are lovely. They're very warm and very welcoming, and I really enjoy being in Texas for that reason. But I don't miss the superficiality. There's a sense that, the bigger the truck, the better. The bigger the house, the better. And, that's just not my thing. I don't really go along with that. I don't think it's more important what you own and what you have than who you are as a person. So I don't miss that superficiality. And that goes along with I don't miss living in sort of a transactional culture where it's all about the money, honey. It's about how much you have, how much you can flaunt it, and who's got it, who doesn't. Yeah, I don't miss living in a transactional culture. And since the pandemic, money has gotten to be a big issue. The cost of things have gotten to be a big issue in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. economy is smoking hot right now, but it's quite expensive to live there. Speaking of expenses, number 12 on the list is tipping. So if you've ever traveled to the US on holiday or vacation, then you're probably familiar with the concept of tipping for everything. And even Americans get kind of fed up with having to tip for everything, even takeout. But yeah, it's a real thing when you get hit up with a more expensive restaurant bill because of the pandemic, and then you've got 20 to 25% sort of expected on top of that for a tip. It's a little bit much. And that goes along with sales tax too. I don't miss that. I used to kind of moan about VAT. I thought 20%, that's kind of a lot, but at least it's baked into the price. If you see a tag on something or an item on a menu, you know that's how much you will pay. You will not get hit with a gotcha at the end of your meal or at the end of the sales receipt. So I don't miss sales tax. So number 13 is kind of a serious one. I definitely don't miss being a woman in the US, especially in Texas, because women's rights have been either eroded or taken away. And I don't think it's great for women's health at all. So I don't miss that. Number 14, last but not least, you probably already know this one, but I don't miss US healthcare. The anxiety, the expense, the cost, the worry is just not healthy, to put it bluntly. So I so much appreciate the NHS. It may not be as perfect as it used to be, but it certainly does what it says on the tin, and it keeps us healthy from cradle to grave. So there you go. Those are some of my thoughts on what I don't miss from the US. Do you have any of your own? Any comments? Please put them below. I so much appreciate you watching, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Bye for now.